Hi, and thank you for tuning into this podcast. My name is Shay Douglas, and in this series, we explore community connection, optimal human potential, and transformational collective growth through inspiring conversations with a diverse range of people who are working towards a positive change in the world. I hope you enjoy this episode today, and if you would please take the time to like, share, and subscribe, we would greatly appreciate that. And I hope you enjoy. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the Wise Women Conversations. My name is Shay Douglas, and that's right, I am not a wise woman, but these ladies are. We've got a special episode tonight. I have my mother in the room, Sally Douglas, is joining me live from the Earth Heroes headquarters. And we've got Collen and Angie joining us from Sunshine Coast and Byron Bay region. So exciting to be back with you, ladies. Thank you for joining me today again.
Hi, Shay.
Just to give you guys a quick update, we have spent the last month meeting together on a Tuesday afternoon to open up the conversation around motherhood and womanhood and the roles and responsibilities of what it takes to be a mother. I am a young man, and so I'm curious to understand at a deeper level the tribulations, the trials, the challenges, and also the joys that these women go through in their life. And so it's our intention to really educate, inspire, and share this wisdom through first-hand experience that these ladies have in their life. In today's episode, we're going to look at the differences between raising a boy and a girl. Now, all three of these women have both sexes as children, and they have a great array of stories, wisdom, experiences, and some knowledge based on their life experience that they're going to be sharing with us today. So it's very exciting. Some of the questions include, what's the difference? Is it the same raising a boy and a girl? Does it matter if you know the sex before or after? Does it make a difference? And we're going to find out in just a moment. But before we do, I just wanted to share a quick little update. The film that Collen features in and that I have played a part in creating, The Regeneration, is being released this month in March 18th with a premiere in Cairns. And then we will be doing an activation tour down the East Coast with screenings in major cities like Townsville, Yeppoon, Airlie Beach, Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, and even Brisbane. So it's exciting times. And I'll drop the link in the comments if you want to check it out. You could have a look at the trailer, which is out there now. And then even if you want to get access to a free online screening from anywhere in the world, we'll be setting dates for those as well. So without going too much further, I just wanted to thank you for tuning in and taking the time out of your day to watch this. These ladies truly have some remarkable experiences to share, and I'm really excited to dive into it. So if you do like this, please just click the like button, maybe leave us a comment. And if you don't like it, that's okay too. Maybe just write us a comment as to what you didn't like. And we always respond to all the comments and would love to hear back from you. So if you do like it, again, please share it with your friends if you found value out of it. Otherwise, let's dive into it, ladies. Sally Douglas, would you like to start first? What's the difference between raising a boy and a young girl? Or is there a difference?
Well, I personally think that my experience was that you were totally different individuals from the moment you entered the world. So I clearly thought there wasn't a complete difference of raising the girls and raising you. You all had your different needs and personality types. So it wasn't until different stages of your progression of growth and adolescence and at different points in your growing up that it would have been evident. But I actually thought that it was more, you were all completely unique and you needed different things. So that's my experience.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. How about for you, Collen?
Yeah, so I have two daughters and a son. And I'd have to say that I agree with Sally with my own experience, that they all had unique little personalities, and that was so evident, like from the day they were born, even actually how I birthed them. Became very apparent. And I don't think as a young mother I was consciously making decisions based on Callum's a boy, therefore I'm going to behave this way with him or choose these certain parenting habits or things for him, and the girls would have different ones. They all experienced as they were growing up the same sports. They all tried all of them, and some stuck and some didn't, and so they all did. I know there's traditional things about boys maybe doing sports, girls doing dancing. Well, my kids did both, and then some continued with it and some didn't. It was just, again, what they loved and what they enjoyed. And I didn't really feel, especially in the early years, that ultimately they all needed the same thing. So they all needed to be loved, feel safe and secure, be nurtured, held, fed, clean diapers. That was really what was important at the end of the day. And I probably didn't notice differences till they got a little bit older. And for me, especially in that mother-daughter role, I think what stood out the most was that, for instance, when my daughters reached ages that maybe I would have had things in my own life not going so well. So I call them wounds or mini traumas or big traumas for that matter. I noticed it more with my girls, and I don't know if that's because of myself growing up as a woman and having experiences that they were now going through, that I started to feel that I was maybe having different conversations with them about certain things. But even as a whole, the girls and Callum and Stephen and myself, we would, everything was always on the table when it came to conversations. So it didn't matter if you were male or female, the conversations that were wide open. So yeah, hope that answers that one. How about you, Angie?
I think ditto to all of the above. And I have a girl and a boy, and my girl is the oldest. And I think where they come in the hierarchy can sometimes make a difference as well. But yeah, like she liked red apples and he liked green, and she liked salt and he liked pepper, and so they certainly had their within their little individual personalities there was differences. I found that, and I think what I'm hearing from you ladies is too, that we're all very much, we were parenting consciously, so not necessarily gender based, but looking at them as their little individual selves. And whilst, say, if you look at the feminine versus the masculine, if I had to lean towards any particular orientation for my girl, she was probably a little bit more needed nurturing and tending around her emotional self and her internal world. And he showed a stronger kind of physicality, like he was more adventurous and curious and wanted to take risks. But I guess that still is the individual, but that's how my guy showed up. She loved like being creative and drawing and colouring in, and she wasn't a big doll person, but she loved that sort of crafty activity and games and what have you. And he sort of tend to like the outdoors a little bit more. And I think like the ladies have said, that it wasn't until they got through their different ages and stages, and Cole, I'd have to agree too, it was my own parenting seasons was also dependent upon how I parented them as a woman, like particularly in relation to my experience with the feminine and my experience with the masculine. So I had to really look at what are my beliefs around the feminine and what am I role modeling to my daughter, and what are my beliefs around the masculine and my beliefs around men in particular, and what am I role modeling to his particular gender. And I found that was really critical, particularly as they came into the pubescent years where they were really noticing boys, or the boys were noticing the girls and watching that dance between boy and girl and man and woman. And I guess too, hers was really around self-image for my daughter in particular, and self-esteem. And for my son, if I had to look at for him, it was around self-confidence as a young man, and self-awareness, because we know that girls' brains develop a little bit quicker than boys, and so therefore their awareness around consequences of risk-taking happens that little bit later. And so they're the kind of little things that I had to be aware of. And yeah, I guess I also was really conscious about having other women in both my children's lives and other men in their lives as role models. So that's probably a long answer to the question.
No, it's a great answer. I love it. I always have these preconceived ideas and questions, but the conversation always unravels to a new place that I couldn't have comprehended before this conversation started. So thanks for your answers and your sharing. Something that I really enjoyed hearing from each of you share in that moment, and I'd love to unpack a little bit more, is around this conscious parenting role that you've all taken under, and how like the question is, this is mostly for other parents out there who are mothering and fathering their children, boys and girls, in this time period. How do you teach, or how do you exemplify self-awareness practices or mindfulness to really cultivate a deeper sense of individuality in character or identity that the young boy or girl, because what I'm hearing from you is that they're essentially their own unique individual, it didn't matter the sex so much, but more so just responding to that child and their uniqueness. And so how do you really cultivate that within these younglings as they grow older?
That's a really interesting question. I think probably one of the things as parents, it's our job to really allow the kids to connect to their true self. So we're more of a guide than we are of a obedience kind of an instructor. It's actually allowing them to individually find their own independence, and taking them their lead, really following them, but with a safe guidance principle, but allowing them to they're really connected to themselves and connected to a lot more as young children than we tend to shut them down. So if we can keep them connected and at the core of that to their higher selves, I think then we've really done a really good job. So it's actually letting them lead and making sure we're giving them safe boundaries to explore, and allowing them to be their unique selves. And I think, what do you ladies think?
Yeah, I think I realize that children, they mimic everything when they're younger as well too. And I think there was a couple times it really made me have to stop and take notice when, like, where were there certain ideas or behaviors coming from, and having to really take stock in my own life about things like self-care, slowing down, communication, all of those kinds of things. And I can remember when the kids were quite little, we didn't have like lots of different rooms in the house. So I had a little bay window at the front, and I had it set up kind of like as a little sacred altar, and there was books there and candles and crystals, and I had like my little meditation cushions there, and there was always spare cushions around. And so I kind of was in the habit, in the morning I would have my meditation before I'd go for a walk. And often even when they were little, they would come and they would sit next to me, or I could hear them like whispering behind, shh, this is mommy's quiet time, or things like that. And just helping them see different ways that they can do their own self-care and create their own self-awareness. And then as a parent, just tapping into what works for them, because they are so different and so unique, and that changes as they go through different stages in their life as well. And I found that I always provided different opportunities. Like some of them would like to go and walk in nature with me. Some would like to go, surfing or swimming, or, just and provide the experiences so that I could then know what they liked and they didn't like. And then that way they'd be able to lead from that space, and just really having to listen to them, what brought them joy, what do they need. And so, yeah, I think it's for me, it was more about that kind of listening, paying attention, providing the experiences so they could try lots of different things and find what worked for them with respect to things that they love to do for activities, or even self-aware. Like some would like painting, some would like drawing, some would like reading, and they were all different in that way as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I've got to add to that, but I think it's a reflection of one, being conscious within ourselves and understanding ourselves as people and not just parents. And I liked what you said, Sal, about allowing them to lead, and also to understand. I just love that, our children are not our children, and they're just really on lend for a certain period of time. And there is that fine line when you're parenting, is like when to hold and when to fold, and when we're setting really clear boundaries. So these boundaries based on our fears, or society's, the culture's fears, or and like I had to look at my follow through in my disciplinary action, and things like that in relation to discipline was always interesting, because discipline in our family was they got to learn how to do a particular chore. So they knew how to put washing on, they knew how to cut vegetables, they knew how to clean toilets, they knew how to, keep their rooms tidy. And that was the sort of disciplinary action, was like, I used it as like a teachable moment. But I think one of the really important things, and I think I loved, like what you said, Col, about listening and communication is really important, and sort of how to listen so that they'll speak to you and not interrupt them, and give them this sense to trust their own experiences, and then be able to express what it is that they felt or what actually happened in a way that allowed their own true, authentic voice to come through. So, and I was really big into having courageous conversations, like scary conversations and I think I started this when they were really little. And when they asked me a question when they were really little, like I didn't actually make something up. Like I remember my mum telling me that, half of everything I asked her was a wing mong for a goose's bridle. Like I don't even know where that came from, but it was I just decided that I wanted to, when my daughter said to me, "Mummy, what's a silver lining?" that I would actually share the truth of the questions that she asked. And, as they got into the pubescent years, it was challenging to have those courageous conversations, around body image, around their sexual orientation, around porn, around their thoughts about the opposite sex, around their teachers, around how they were experiencing life, and also to make them feel safe enough that their opinions mattered, and also to question their judgments as such, and to hold them accountable for their own ideas, I guess, that they were forming, but have a really loose rope around their capacity to be able to move and change, and change their minds and opinions based on where they were getting their information from, whether it was within the family home or at school or outside of the family home. So I think, conscious parenting, it really requires you to be involved and really engaged and really present. That would be the three things that, and be an allowance of what, how they were showing up.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing, ladies. Really insightful. I remember when I must have been around 8 or 9 years old, and just touching on what Cole was expressing around children just observing their mother and what they were doing. And mum was going off to a yoga class, and she kind of dragged me along. I definitely wasn't into yoga at that time. I had my head stuck on the football pitch, but I went along anyway, and I loved it because I just fell asleep pretty much the whole time in Shavasana. I remember it clearly. It was at the Tanks in Ed Chill here in Cairns. And that was my first ever yoga experience with my mum. And now I look back at it and I love yoga now. And yeah, it's really nice to kind of share that moment and be introduced to something so powerful like yoga as a personal practice from my own mum. So that's really awesome. And I guess my next question leading on to that around, I've got a couple of questions here in this one, but we could tie them together essentially because they might fit in as one question, but it has to do with the challenges in the differences between a boy and a girl, because surely like not everything is all rainbows and butterflies. There will be challenges at times. Were young boys more challenging, or were young women more challenging? And in that respect, like really, what role did our culture play in the upbringing of the boys and of the girls? So, and what I mean by that is, Angie spoke to this a little bit, saying that, you know, there's multiple role models and mentors for young children, young men and young girls these days. A mother can only do so much in the raising of their child. There are so many other influences in our society and in our families and in our community circles that help to raise young boys and girls. So what role does the culture play at large with the raising of our boys and girls? And the other question again was, who was more challenging, the boys or the girls?
Wow. Well, when you ask that question, what comes to mind for me is the actual family dynamics, where I do remember a period in life where you could have been a little bit harsh on your younger sister. And I think one of the kind of ways of sort of subsiding that energy was to actually get you outdoors and get you moving. You know, it was an energetic thing. So it seemed to be that if you got physical, then all that attention that was going into niggling or annoyance or would be kind of dissipated. So there was a definite clear difference between a brother and a sister, kind of a need at that point. So it was very clear that the way to break that up was to use a certain type of style of behavior rather than what would be suitable for your sister. So in relation to the question, sorry, I've lost the question.
No, that's good. So
that was the challenging, yeah. And what was the second part?
The role of culture.
The role of culture within that. I think that one of the main things that is really important to remember is it does take a village to raise a child. So the more positive influences we can have, whether it's uncles or friendships or even through different channels of interest, whether it is a pop star or a football star or whatever it may be for that individual child, I think it's the influence is for each individual to find what supports their goal in life or what their interest is and where they want to go with it. So it's looking for positive influences within that arena, and it does have a really, really huge impact on each individual child. I mean, that you can often see young girls that have posters of their heartthrob on the wall that, you know, will influence what styles of fashion they like and the music and what they're listening to. So it is a really important part of growing up. It really is, and it's an individual thing, and we can only influence so much. They will find their own role models within that, I guess. So it does have a huge influence. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So the things I feel kind of stood out for me is I noticed when the kids were quite young that Callum would have been a little bit more clingier. I'm gonna just I guess, term it, than the girls. And I noticed even probably when he hit that, 2 and 3, that he definitely needed me being more present with him. And look, it could be a boy thing, but it also could be the fact that he was a third child. So I'm sure there was a combination of things happening there. So that was kind of one of the things that stood out for me when they were that younger, that he was constantly attached to my hip. That was definitely something that was memorable. And look, I loved every minute of it, but it was a change from having had Sophie and then Nicola. So I did notice that. And then kind of as they got older, the thing that stands out the most for me, and I kind of chatted just or hinted to it in my earlier answers, is that again, when my oldest hit an age and a time when I had had a lot of challenges in my own life, I realized that there was friction coming up between the two of us. And so some of my concerns and fears were coming up. I had, in my own family of origin, my parents were divorced quite young, and there was like challenges with that, and a stepfather and abuse. And so there were things that kind of were unconsciously being triggered. And so then the fears that I was probably putting on to Sophie, being the first one, the first girl to be hitting that age. And I could see that there was tensions, and I was probably constricting and controlling and a little bit not great in my communication. And that was the real biggest bump that I've had in parenting. And it was also the wake-up call for me to really explore communicating and what was actually going on, and really stepping into some more of my own healing so that I wasn't passing that off on her and creating those fears that really didn't need to be part of her life. And it took a while for us to navigate through that. But the best part of it is that it really helped me step more into that next level of being a conscious parent, and to be able to do that so much better with Nicola and Callum as well. And I guess from the cultural standpoint, it definitely takes a village, and the more people you can have around to support yourself and your kids is going to be beneficial. But I think the culture side that I really look at is the expectations. And that was one thing I did notice, like whether it was like grandparents or aunts and uncles, or even other like parents in the schoolyard, just their preconceived ideas of how boys should be raised or how girls should be raised or behave or dressed, or all those kinds of things. That was more the pressure that I can remember feeling externally, and just having to say, like, no, that's not how I'm choosing to raise my child, and having to be really strong and firm around that and be able to tune out all of that noise, because again, that's just all of their things, and it didn't apply to what was relevant and what was best for me as a parent, and also for my children and what they needed. Yeah. And how about you, Angie?
Did you hear that? Am I unmuted? Yeah, I didn't have any challenges. No, look, Shay, it's I think it's part of life, and it's an interesting space to navigate. But I remember at a point, probably the earlier years were a lot easier in my situation, but it was when they got into the rite of passage of going into puberty and wanting their own individual freedom, wanting to take more risks, not wanting to share as much with mum or dad, wanting more privacy, wanting to hang out with who they wanted to hang out with. So I guess navigating their individual choices could be challenging if it wasn't in alignment with what I thought or with what I wanted. So that was really an interesting time. I think from a cultural perspective, I probably would have to say that it was more challenging for my daughter in relation to what the culture says is beautiful. So there was more kind of, there was a bigger lens on self-image and what a beautiful girl looks like, and what the media were portraying through magazines, and we came through that sort of early immature digital age, 15 years ago, where cyberbullying was probably not as secure as it was back then. So those sorts of challenges were probably the biggest ones that we faced within our family, within our family system, and just navigating. So giving her as much positive reinforcement around body shape and her internal landscape, and developing that and cultivating the more important thing beyond what she considered herself, what she considered, beauty to be. So I think that was probably the most challenging part for me, and sexual objectification around women, and around what, girls, if they were seen to have a boyfriend early or seen to be friendly with boys, what that meant about them. So that kind of, those sorts of conversations I think were really important, and helping her understand her own body wisdom I think was really, really important.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode and for listening to this podcast. I really hope you enjoyed this series, and if you'd like to listen to the full episode and get more conscious content online, tune into our online video platform at earthheroestv.com. Hope you have a great day, guys, and a huge love from me, and see you next time.